Hello everyone. This tutorial is going to help you with your lab report, specifically how to deal with decimal place, significant figures, and uncertainty. And uncertainty just for your average value. Anything with data processing is a different video. Alright, so let's take a look. Let's go straight to what would be raw data. So let's go to Excel. Let's pretend you've done your experiment, you've collected your data, and you've made a nice table like this one. Notice I labeled it Table 1, and this is your raw data. And let's pretend you're doing an experiment that's going to change the temperature of water, and at each temperature, you're going to find out how much salt you can dissolve in it. Okay, more temperature, more salt. Great. And these numbers are completely made up, by the way. Alright, so let's start. In your table, you've got to include some things. You must include uncertainty in the heading. So let's go to the first one. You have to include an uncertainty number here. In fact, when you measured the temperature, you used a thermometer, and that thermometer has an uncertainty. And we've talked about this. And you have to include the uncertainty of the thermometer. Notice I'm adding my uncertainty symbol. There it is. You have to include the uncertainty, of the thermometer. In this case, that thermometer was able to measure up to a tenth of a degree Celsius. Every tool will have a different uncertainty, and it's the smallest that it can measure. We've already talked about that. So notice how nicely this came out. We've added the uncertainty on there. That's one thing down. Second thing, all of the numbers here, notice this little note, all the numbers in a column must be to the same decimal place. In fact, they have to be to this decimal place, whatever decimal place is of the uncertainty. So right now, the 4, the 10, and the 50 are wrong. I need to have them to this decimal place. Now I can type this in manually if I want, 4.0. But I happen to have this overridden. I'm going to tell you why in just a minute. You can use these buttons right here, and they will add or remove decimal places. The more you click this, the more you add or take away. I happen to have that set beforehand. That's why it wouldn't let me type it in. I can do the same thing for the 50. And there we go. They're all now to one decimal place, just like my uncertainty. I need to do the same thing with my mass. Turns out in this example, I used a scale that went to, looks like 0.01. So I'm going to do that as well. I'm going to go to Insert, Symbol. There's my plus minus sign. And 0.01, and I have to have my unit grams. Now I need all of these to match. And this one does not. In fact, I can go safe and select all of them and start adding decimal places. Oh, it's too many. I'm going to go to 2. This guarantees that every number is to 2 decimal places. Done. Okay? So there's your 2 rules. 1, uncertainty in the heading. There it is. And 2, all the numbers in a column must be to that same decimal place. There's your first 2 rules. Okay, so we add the rules there to the bottom so you can see them and it will remind you. Great, let's move on to Table 2. Now, Table 2, we're actually going to find the average. So I'm going to work a little bit on my Table 2 here. I'm going to put my heading here, and it's 2 cells, so I'm going to merge this. And I'm going to go ahead and type in here that this is going to be the average of mass of NaCl dissolved. And I've got to include my units, and that's in grams. Great. Notice how it's much longer than what I need to write. So I can fix that. 2-finger click, Format Cells. You probably know this already, but just in case, you can then wrap text. There it is. And then OK. That's under alignment, by the way. Sometimes this comes up on number. Under alignment, wrap text. OK. And there it does that. It wraps it. Okay, now this right here. I'm actually going to make this equal to this cell here so that I have my uncertainty, because I need my uncertainty always in the heading. Remember this rule. In fact, this entire column will be the same. So I can just copy this, and I'm going to copy instead of retyping it in case I make a change to it. It will fix it. If I find out later that this was actually 60 degrees and I change it there, it'll show up here. Okay. I'm going to give this a little bit of color so it looks nice. And I'm going to go ahead and make all of this bordered because I'm going to copy this later to Word. Alright, now I need here my average value. So I'm not going to do this on a calculator. I'm going to take advantage of Excel. And Excel will do this for me, and most of you know this already. If you type in average, it'll come up, and you can just highlight the cells that you want averaged, hit enter, and it'll give you the average value. Click and drag, and you've got them all. And now we've got numbers. And we need to once more make sure that these are to the same decimal place as these. And I'm going to make that rule number 3 right here. The average value must be to the same decimal place as the trials. 2 decimal places here because all of these have 2 decimal places. Rule number 3. Alright, great. So far so good. Now we need, let's bring this over a little bit. Now we need to calculate the uncertainty for this number. And I'm going to drop this down so we can, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit here, so we can make this fit. And in this column, I'm going to type in the uncertainty of the average mass, because it's not going to be 0.001. And this is going to be in grams. And once again, I've got the same problem, so I'm going to merge this. And now I've got to do the same thing we did before. Wrap the text. Now it kind of all fits. There we go. Notice that before we had the uncertainty as 0.01. That's because we used that scale to take that one measurement. But this is the uncertainty of this number right here, 0.09. What's the uncertainty of 0.09? That number. And this is what we need to find out. So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to take 0.09 and compare it to these 3 and find the biggest difference between 0.09 and these 3 numbers. So the difference between 0.09 and 0.08, well, that's 0.01. The difference between 0.09 and 0.11, oh, that's a bigger number. That's 0.02. We want the biggest difference. And of course, between 0.09 and 0.09, the difference is 0. So the biggest difference is 0.02, and that is now the uncertainty for 0.09. Let's do the same thing here for 0.17. The biggest difference between 17 and 15, 19 and 16, well, 17 and 15 is 2, 2, and 1. So the difference is, the uncertainty is 0.02. Biggest difference between 45 and 50 is 0.05. This would be 1. This would be 3. So it's 0.05. Alright, so we can finish this out fairly quickly. And while we do that, we add the rule at the bottom. And you'll notice once again that that rule is, of course, that the uncertainty is the largest difference between the average and each of the trials. For 96, it's between 96 and 1.04, making it 0.8. And this one is 0.13. Okay, great. Next rule. The uncertainty of the average. And the uncertainty of the average must match in decimal place to the average. So we do need all of these to 2 decimal places, and so we need the uncertainty to 2 decimal places as well. So we can make this look nice. We're kind of going with this peachy color. And let's go with highlighted here on the cells and make it look nice. Alright, at this point we have our uncertainty in grams. If, however, we needed to also have our uncertainty in percentage, we can do that as well. So let's take a look at how to do that. So I'm actually going to take this heading here and just copy it over. And the only thing I'm going to change is the unit, because now we're not going to do this in grams, but as a percentage. And now we need to know what percent this uncertainty is of the average value. So I'll type in equals this divided by this. That will give me the decimal. Multiply it times 100 will give me the percentage. Now this number tells me that 0.02 is 21% of this. It's actually not a great uncertainty. It's kind of high. You'll see some of these are smaller and some are bigger. In this case, no, they all actually happen to be smaller. Now what's my next rule? I can't have all of these decimal places. I can only have the decimal places that I have in the uncertainty. I'm sorry, in the average. So this number has one decimal place. So this number can only have one decimal place. And technically I have to round up. I cannot round uncertainty down. This becomes 30%. I can't round down. This one can have 2 because 17 has 2 significant figures. So this can also have 2 significant figures. Okay, so notice I've added 2 headings here. Here's my average. One uncertainty for it is this one here, the absolute uncertainty in the same units, and it must match in decimal place. I can express the same uncertainty as a percentage. It's the uncertainty of the average as a percentage, and this one must match in significant figures. This is 2 and this is 2, so these two values must be reduced down to 2 significant figures. And it's not quite going to work because that one's now 3. Now I'm to 2. This one can actually be to 3. You could leave your data like this. If you don't want to have this to different decimal places, you can just round this one up to 9 and round this one up to 7. And you can do that as well if you want. There's no need. This one, of course, would have to drop back down to 7. And this one would have to drop to 9 if you wanted to do that. Okay? Great. That takes care of calculating your uncertainty and your decimal place and significant figures. Okay, the last thing I've just added up here is just the name of each of these. Notice absolute uncertainty and relative uncertainty. We've talked about this in class, but just wanted to keep those clear so that you can see them. All right, good luck. Hope this helped.